Hello, Dr. James Bogash, expert in health and longevity and creator of Bogash Life and Balance. And today we're going to talk about pollen and how it potentially affects COVID levels. Now, this shouldn't come as a terribly big surprise. Early on, I reviewed a study looking at air pollution and COVID and how in some regions, recovery from COVID or numbers going down might have more to do with the air becoming clearer as a result of the lockdowns than the lockdowns themselves. In those scenarios, it would make sense that we would work on cleaning up the air rather than locking down the economy, because that's really where the effect was, not from the actual lockdowns. This particular study, researchers looked at pollen in particular because pollen is known to suppress or to shut down our own an aspect of our immune system called interferon. And we use interferon to help fight off things like respiratory viruses. So when pollen levels go up, interferon levels go down and respiratory infections become far more common. So it would certainly make sense that COVID, which is a viral respiratory infection, would be on this same list. And sure enough, they found that high pollen count, and let's back this up, they looked at 130 different sites across 31 countries and 5 continents. We can pretty much rule out Antarctica because I really don't think COVID affects the penguins and they could probably care less about lockdowns. So I think they're currently in summer right now as well, so that would certainly be helpful for them. But a huge data pool that they looked at, and they found that pollen counts had, because we know that COVID cases vary widely across the globe, and that's why you can't look at the United States and compare us to Africa, to Australia, to England, because there's a lot of variabilities. People like to compare that, and they like to throw politics in the mix, but you also have to look at the underlying health of the country. The United States is a very unhealthy country, and but also air quality. We already know early on, I already mentioned studies out of China, but we saw that out of New York, where air quality had a direct correlation with COVID cases. And so pollen counts accounted for 44% of the variability in COVID infection. So in other words, in areas where pollen counts went up, COVID cases went up following was about a 4-day delay. So clearly, pollen had an effect on this. And what was interesting, when they looked at lockdowns were more effective when pollen counts were higher. So it might not have been from the lockdown working in the ways that we might have thought it was. It might have been more effective at a time when pollen counts were higher. Well, instead, when we know that pollen counts are higher, that's where things like masking in high-risk individuals would make more sense. And people have always done that. People who, especially in Asian countries where air pollution was higher, and people who, when they have high pollen count days, people who've known to be, they've always known that they've been sensitive, that they've worn masks themselves to protect themselves long before COVID was a thing. So again, just educating ourselves into what's really going on here and when certain interventions might have more of an effect. And instead of something like a lockdown, maybe that's the time to wear masks when pollen counts are higher. Those kind of things make sense. And when we look at all the data, COVID's not some mysterious thing. It really completely makes sense. And we understand an awful lot about what happens and why things happen where. As always, I'll post a link to this particular study in the description. Make sure you share this video with somebody who you think needs the information. Give the video a like and subscribe to the channel.